The Walrus and the Carpenter, Part 2, Stanza 3. Now, this third stanza is entirely devoted to description. The sea is described as wet and sand is described as dry and parched. The sky is presented as cloudless and no birds can be seen either. Now we've read the first two stanzas and this is the third one. The mention of the sun, the moon, and billows, and the sea, the sand, and clouds, and birds, all these words establish the landscape and the setting of the poem. All right. Now, The Walrus and the Carpenter, this poem, has two very famous similes. The sea was wet as wet. The sands were dry as dry. Now, we all know what a simile is. A simile is a literary device that compares one thing to another using the words like or as. Now, Carroll, the poet, uses these similes to compare the thing with itself. Wet as wet, dry as dry. Now, it's silly, no doubt, but we have to remember that this poem is an excellent example of nonsense verse. It skews logic and meaning. All right, so we have two similes here. The sea was wet as wet, the sands were dry as dry, and was wet as wet is also an alliteration. Dry as dry is also an alliteration. And of course, these are two similes as well. So this is all about this stanza. There's not much of an explanation. Let's move to the next one. Now, in this stanza, the two principal characters of the poem, the walrus and the carpenter, have been introduced. They are shown walking along the beach, and they are walking very close to each other. This expression, close at hand, establishes a sense of closeness. It seems that they have a close association, that they have a partnership, that they are in cahoots. Yes? And when we see them, the walrus and the carpenter, look at this third line, this line, they wept like anything. Now they are shedding tears. They are crying because for some unknown reason, they have a problem with the presence of so much sand on the beach. And read these two lines. If this were only cleared away, they said it would be grand. And they feel that the place, the beach, would look grand, would look magnificent, would look impressive with no sand in it. They are bothered by the huge quantities of sand. Now, this is highly obnoxious and absurd. Definitely, to go to a beach and complain about sand. You know, it's like you want to see a desert, but you don't want to see the sand. Some people, some readers find this arrogance, and there are some who feel this is snobbery. There are some readers who find it hilarious. I would say that the sheer arrogance of these two characters who feel that a beach without sand is a better arrangement is highlighted here. If you try to recollect the first stanza, where the sun had disrupted the cosmic order, similarly, these two want to disrupt the natural order of things. And moreover, they they do not justify, the reason for this desire. They don't give any reason, they don't give any explanation regarding why they dislike the sand so much. They just hide. They just hide their hypocrisy by shedding tears, as if they are genuinely pained, as if they are genuinely anguished. They are agonized by this order of nature. Now, we must not forget, again, I will emphasize that it's a nonsense verse. It defies logic, it defies meaning, it defies sense, and the readers definitely are surprised by the desire of the walrus and the carpenter to see the beach cleared of sand. Now, do we see any figure of speech here? As of now, I cannot see any. All right, so let's move ahead to the next stanza. Yes. Now, please read these lines carefully and try to imagine what is happening. Why are we talking about the maids here? If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year. Now, what is ironic here is that the walrus and the carpenter want the beach, they want the beach to be cleared of all the sand, but they want someone else to do it. They don't intend to do it themselves. They want maids. They want maids to do this job for them. So they seem privileged. Yes, they seem powerful. Why powerful? Because they can actually dare to think of a beach without sand. Because for some reason, they don't like sand. All right. Now the walrus thinks if 7 maids sweeping with 7 brooms for a period of 6 months would be able to clear all the sand off the shore. However, the carpenter expresses a doubt. See, he says, "I doubt it," said the carpenter. However, the carpenter expresses a doubt regarding such a possibility. They realize the impossibility of clearing the sand from the beach, even if great efforts were dedicated to this task. And once again, the carpenter sheds a bitter tear. Now, bitter means angry. Bitter means resentful. So, the carpenter, now because what he wants is not going to happen, the carpenter is angry and he cries, he sheds a tear, bitter tear, which shows he's angry. He is resentful. Now, the apparent absurdity of this conversation cannot be blindly rejected. It prepares the readers for what unfolds in the next stanzas. Now, do we see a figure of speech here? Yes. We have an alliteration. Once again, 7 maids, 7 mops. All right, this is an alliteration. Let's move on to the next stanza. Yes. Now read the lines carefully. "O oysters, come and walk with us." So what is happening? The walrus now addresses. He addresses some oysters in the water and requests them. The walrus did beseech. Beseech means he requests them. He requests the oysters. He pleads with them to come and take a walk with them on the beach. He insists that it will be an enjoyable stroll with enjoyable conversation along the salty beach. Briny beach means salty beach. He claims, now read the next two lines. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each. So, what does he do? He claims that they don't have room for more than 4 oysters. What does it mean? See, basically the carpenter wants to say that he has 2 hands, Walrus has 2 hands. Together, they can give a hand to not more than 4 oysters. So what is he doing exactly? He is enticing. He is enticing the oysters. He allures them with honeyed words, with pleasing sweet words, so that they leave their home in the seabed and come along with them to walk and talk along the beach. Now here we see him using a typical ploy, a tactic, a cunning plan of salesmanship, isn't it? Claiming that his offer is open only to 4 of them, only to 4 oysters. He adopts this strategy. He adopts this strategy to arouse the curiosity of the whole group of oysters, as we'll just find out in the next stanza. All right. Now here, do we see any figure of speech? Yes. One more alliteration. Briny beach. Let's move on to the next stanza. Now please read these lines carefully. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head. Now the eldest oyster remains silent while looking back at the walrus. He then winks and shakes his head sadly. If you read these 2 words, heavy head. What do you mean by heavy head? Just as we say with a heavy heart, a heart filled with sadness, she left the place with a heavy heart. So he shakes his head, he shook his heavy head. Now, heavy head could mean that he is sad, he's shaking his head sadly, or maybe he is just weary. He is tired. Heavy head. So, heavy head could mean these 2 things. All right. Now, this oyster is the eldest. We have to understand here. He is the eldest oyster. He is apparently experienced. He is experienced. Yeah. And I can actually feel that he is an oyster of wisdom. Just like we say he's a man of wisdom, he is an oyster of wisdom. He has insight. He has discernment. What is discernment? Discernment means ability to judge people and things well. Now, he never says a word, yet he winks. Now, his winking could mean a warning, a signal, which he probably wanted to communicate to the young oysters. It could mean that he wanted the young oysters to understand the deception involved, although he was too scared to say anything out aloud, as the walrus and the carpenter are authoritative figures. They have authority. They have power. They can dare to think of a beach without sand. Now we can relate these figures to the sun. If you recollect when we read the first stanza, the sun who displayed authority and power so shamelessly, isn't it? And here I can see yet another alliteration, heavy head. So let's move on to the next stanza. Now, as this video is almost 15 minutes long, let's meet in the next video for the rest of the explanation. Thank you.